Research has too often been done in silos, with great focus on a narrow area of expertise. But through shared knowledge and access to data, wider problems can be solved. From inequality to sustainability, from helping our ageing population to better ways of raising our children. It's that spark of an idea, disrupting what we know. By thinking differently, our behaviour will change. This research is already happening. But now there is a new home in Cardiff that brings it together. A place open to the world that celebrates and encourages innovative thinking, collaborative working, and sharing ideas. The world's first social science research park. Spark. A spark to change our futures.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's a beautiful day at Spark in Cardiff. The weather's perfect. We've ordered it especially for our 2 weeks of the virtual summer school. I'm Charlotte Stevenson, and I'm a business development manager working in professional development at Cardiff University. And I wanted to welcome you to our day 4 of our virtual summer school, which is running over the next week. This is the 3rd year of running our virtual summer schools, and it was an idea born out of the pandemic, which has grown over the last 3 years. This year, we're focusing on some of the fantastic research that's going on in and around Cardiff University. Before we get going today with our fantastic speaker, just a few bits of housekeeping. We've got the chat function there if you want to talk to the team, you've got any sound problems, etc. And we've also got the Q&A open. So any questions you want to pose to Dr. Jack Underwood, pop them in there and we'll make sure to ask them at the end. We're still working in different locations, so bear with us if we've got any sort of technical problems. We'll also be circulating an evaluation at the end of the virtual summer school fortnight, which will be the end of next week. And we ask that you please fill that in because that feedback will allow us to carry on this kind of free CPD activity. That's enough from me. I'm thrilled to introduce our fantastic speaker this morning, Dr. Jack Underwood from the Neuroscience and Mental Health Research Institute. Jack.
Thank you. So, usual thing of sharing some slides. So, yeah, I'm Dr. Jack Underwood. I'm a GW4 CAT PhD doctoral fellow and a forensic psychiatry registrar trainee. And I'm here today to talk about collaboration, and particularly how collaboration is important, not just in the influencer social media space, but for us as researchers and clinicians and in all third sector environments. So, and really I'll keep going back to it, but collaboration has been around as long as kind of science has been around. If you go back to Charles Darwin, he said that all of humanity, all of the animal world has been most effective in when they've collaborated. But if you think about what is collaboration, well, this is just kind of taken from Google, and I'm definitely focusing on the former, so the action of working with someone to produce something and not traitorous cooperation with the enemy. But again, thinking kind of through history, through all the great names in science, they all leverage and talk of working with other people and standing on the shoulders of giants and combining to produce great work. So this session is going to be interactive. I'm using Menti if you've used it before, so you should be able to access it from your phone or your computer, anything that's got internet access. And if you go to menti.com and use the code given at the top of the screen, then you should be able to log in. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then the questions will start coming in a minute. So thinking about collaboration, first of all, think about who can you collaborate with. So yeah, any offers from that, from you, the audience? Yeah, colleagues. Yeah, great. So it's a mixture. It's people in your own team, it's the general public, it's third sector organizations, charities, pretty much anyone. I love that last comment. Basically anyone who's interested would be a great person to collaborate with, because it's actually about driving that interest and that energy in the work you're doing. So I was having a think about kind of all the different groups that in my work I might collaborate with. And so you've got all over the place. If you think about, so my work is in autism and I have my funders, but you've got, I work for Cardiff University, we work for Cardiff University, my work links into the NHS, and this is, if you're in Cardiff, you might have seen this building before. It's Whitchurch Hospital, which was Whitchurch Asylum, closed in 2016. Yeah, great, beautiful listed building, now sadly kind of decaying. But yeah, there's this kind of link for a lot of healthcare work between the university and NHS, but actually what else feeds into that? Well, you've got the funders who might fund your work, and that might be kind of the big major funders like UKRI, NIHR, Wellcome. It might be a smaller charity funder, and that charity funder might also help guide where the work needs to go. So that actually, if you want to get feedback, if you want to get people with lived experience involved, those charities can be a great source. Who else feeds into that? Well, the government, because the government is guiding a lot of what we can do. It guides priorities, it guides funding, and also it says, there's the law. And then there's also for us, for kind of those of us who are doing medical work, well, we're guided by royal colleges as well. But in the middle of all this is the patient or the participant or the person who might be involved in the research or might have a kind of stakeholder, and actually how do they feed into this? So again, coming back to that, no researcher is an island. You can't do your work on, you can't live in kind of splendid isolation in research. You have to, you can't, so these are some monk's cells off the coast of, on an island off the coast of Ireland. And, this is where monks went to kind of pray, and they had their kind of, yeah, they could work, they could live and focus their lives around God, but actually that wouldn't work in research. You can't work on your own. So we've got an idea of who you might collaborate with, and it's pretty much anyone who's interested, but kind of lots of different sources. But how would you collaborate? Again, question for you all. Yeah, so some great ideas here. So kind of joint projects, webinars, the workshops, all of these sort of engagement events to try and get people involved, and team working groups. These are all ways that we could try and involve other people. So this is just some ideas taken from, so there's an international association for participation in research. And when we talk about public engagement in research, this is kind of what's expected of research. So this is the kind of what we expect, which is that in all collaboration, we're expecting people to inform those we're working with, and the population, people with interests, that they want to be informed of what's going on. We need to do that involving consultation, and involve those people with lived experience, or stakeholders in the decision making, and that can be done through collaboration and empowerment. And these are kind of the different stages that actually you move through to have really good collaboration. So kind of the most basic forms of collaboration are kind of the informing and consulting, right through to empowerment is the kind of greatest, the most the best level. And how do we do that? So you've given some great ideas already, but here's kind of moving through the different stages. Here's some kind of opportunities. So just for information, to provide information to stakeholders or to people with lived experience or people who are involved in the research or who might want to be involved. What information? So that might be those having a website, the leaflets, the meetings, those workshops. But then if we move up in kind of terms of stages and in terms of what we'd strive for in terms of public engagement, well, consultation. So that's actually opening documents, opening plans up to people with lived experience, so people with to stakeholders outside of the production team, and using that Q&A and town hall events to work through that, and then involving individuals in that work. So that's the workshops, the polls, actually starting to place decision making within the hands of outside of the kind of classic design team. So outside of you, you're not making decisions on this project, you're putting decision making in the hands of everyone. And then you take that a stage further and actually start including and truly collaborating with interested people by including them in the design process and into the committees that run the design process. And that includes participatory decision making, so public polls, or even moving over to having whole sections of the work handed over to teams of people who are interested, affected parties, people with lived experience. So why would you do this? Why collaborate in the first place? Again, a question set for you. Yeah, great. So actually, the collaboration's about producing a better product, producing a better, the end result is always going to be better for having more minds on it, for having more involvement. So not only are you making, by collaborating with other people, it means that you're this kind of problem shared, problem halved. You're not having to think about it on your own. You get other perspectives, other hands in, but actually it means that you might be asking questions, you might be having differing viewpoints, you might be having asking kind of getting extra expertise and knowledge in from other people's point of view, using new relationships and extra skills. And this is, yeah, so these last couple of points are great. So kind of avoiding duplication, actually, again, it's that working in isolation. Well, if you're working in isolation, how do you know what other people are doing? That's always been a problem in science, and kind of the competition to publish first, silo yourself down, and so you're only going to publish, you're not going to tell anyone what you're doing until it's published, just in case someone might steal. Well, actually, that you end up duplicating. There's a huge duplication of work, and so the collaboration prevents that. Why bother doing that if you can all work together and have a stronger product at the end? And this point of challenging bias, actually, you need to kind of combine thoughts, and you need to work together to produce that work, but also having people with lived experience involved, having people who've other stakeholders involved might change the language you use. So we have this a lot in my work is in autism. We have this a lot in autism work, that the language that is used in clinical work, and particularly in kind of certain journals, is not the language that the autistic community would like. It's a lot of the language, the medical language that's used, is deemed to be quite offensive to the autistic community. And actually, if you include the autistic community, I include the autistic community in my work, that actually changes the language we use, and actually it becomes a much it's a kind of much better product, because actually we're asking the questions that the people with lived experience want to know, and we're providing the answers to them in a way that they want to see it and that isn't insulting to them. And I think also this is about kind of where we're interfacing with third sector and with funders and with priorities for research. So again, kind of referring back to my own work, I work in autism, and actually a lot of the questions that we want to ask, well, historically, researchers and individual researchers would ask the questions that we want to know the answer to, but that might not be the answer that the community wants. That might not be the question the community wants to ask. And so the charities, third sectors, even kind of the workshops can be the source of finding the questions that actually people want to know the answer to. So again, coming back to kind of, so I've done some work with Autistica, who's one of the autism charities, who actually produce information on what are the top 10 research questions that the autistic community want answered. And I imagine there are other charities for each kind of area doing that sort of work. And that means that actually, when you do the work, when you do research, when you collaborate with people, you're answering what they want to know. You're going to have better impact. You're going to have better, a more interesting result. And it's not just kind of the charities who are interested. So I'm funded by Wellcome, so I come back to Wellcome, but this is kind of applying to all funders now. Actually, that funders who are funding the research, who are going to pay you to do the work, who are going to pay for the work to happen, want to know that you're answering the questions that the community wants answered, and that you're involving the community in the work. So in Wellcome's latest strategy, your work has to involve people who have lived experience. And then you come through right to, so even when you've done the work, you've got the funding, you've involved everyone, when you come to, so in research, when you come to publish, when you come to share that knowledge in the kind of traditional manners using publication in journals, well, the journals are starting to move as well. They're starting to expect that you collaborate. And this is the whole culture of research gradually shifting. So again, kind of coming back to my work in autism, actually, the expectation is that if you're going to be working in autism and publishing in autism, you include autistic individuals or autistic community in co-production of the result, in co-production of the work. So it's not just something we need to aspire to, it's also something which we're going to have to do. And if you're not going to start collaborating, and if you're not going to work not just kind of amongst a team of researchers, but also with those with lived experience, with the community, with the public, then you're not going to get funding and you're not going to get your work published. So you need to be looking at actually not just as, what are my routes to sharing information through journals, but also, having town hall events, having events that kind of interact with the community. And so for a kind of example of this, so I work quite closely with a community for the Timothy Syndrome Alliance, which is for a community for individuals with a variant in a gene called CACNA1C. And we've held yearly events now where we have we invite families from around the world to come to Cardiff to a day of talks about the latest research on their condition, on Timothy syndrome and all the associated research. And we get professors and kind of all range of kind of early career researchers together to come and talk about their research, what they're doing, and then that can guide you. It gives an opportunity for the families to ask questions about actually what's interesting to them from the research, but also what they want answered. So this is a little, we're producing some public engagement films with them at the moment, and this is kind of an example of one of them.
Calvin's always loved doodling. Ever since his formative years when he was growing up, he loved the idea of putting things down onto paper or organising cars or objects into lines or colours or shapes. to try and articulate what he doesn't usually say, and doodling's a vital part of that communication for Calvin.
Done.
Calvin didn't speak until he was in his first year at primary school, when we had our 2-year health visitor come over. We knew there was a problem. He wasn't walking, he wasn't sitting up properly, and he wasn't vocalising.
Well, he loved articulating. He would express himself, but was very much non-verbal. So he would use sign language, or point, or use grunts or consonants to try and get across what it was he wanted to do.
Can you remember the sign for toy car? Can you?
He didn't do so well at standard school. They were really kind. They tried everything they could to include him. Calvin would sit down with his homework and we'd look at it, look at each other, look at Calvin. Calvin would put his fingers in his mouth and his eyes would widen and he'd shrug. And that was pretty much how school days went.
He wasn't showing autism, but he was showing something. He wasn't showing his ADHD, but he was something. You just know that something isn't right.
It was that not knowing bit that was the hardest bit, but there was no support for it because there was no one could pigeonhole it and no one could say this is what was wrong with him. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know how to react or what to do to make Calvin's life as productive or as easy as possible. What we got was a bunch of specialists in lots of different departments saying, nope, that must be a heart thing, or nope, that must be a brain thing. I suggest you go here next. And so we were bounced from pillar to post, essentially. And that's what life is like for a child with no diagnosis that clearly has challenges at school and in his personal life as well.
The letter that came from the geneticist that said Calvin had a change in the gene CACNA1C. This was the first time we knew we were dealing with a genetic problem, and it was the first time that the heart had been mentioned. Without the genetic investigations that happened, I don't think we'd have ever found out what was going on with Calvin. We had absolutely no choice but to become experts in our own situation. We have to become advocates for our own kids. I mean, this is our son. This is our son in a file. This is from
A file, we've got 4.
From 4 files.
There's probably more.
From when he had his 2-year check that started the whole investigation to the present day, and you know, the last one's full.
And they start actually with interesting letters saying, don't worry, I'm sure everything will be all right. There's probably just a bit of a speech delay. All the way through to where we are now, which is, well, it's a diagnosis of sorts, but it's another step down the road.
I have Timothy syndrome. It is a rare multi-system disorder caused by genetic changes in the L-type calcium channel gene, CACNA1C. There are around 43 patients in the world, most of them children like me. Timothy syndrome presents major health concerns, which can include heartbeat problems, brain development delays, joints of fingers and toes, weak immune system, low blood sugar, tummy and dental problems, plus more besides.
The point of diagnosis is a bit of a blow. Although it's an answer, it's not necessarily one you'd want to receive. And we decided early on, after this diagnosis, that we said, knowledge is power.
Mummy and Daddy found a Facebook group with other families, just like ours.
We found friendship and information and support and a place to talk openly about everything that we'd been through.
It made a big difference, didn't it? Because essentially we were on our own. Even after we had a diagnosis of sorts, we were still on our own because there was no one else that had experience of this. We've done so much work on it now that we tend to know more about the syndrome and the physical effects and the symptoms that present themselves every day than any doctor does, because no one studies this particular aspect of genetic change, at least not in its final form, which in this case is Calvin. We didn't know what was going to happen to Calvin, and we still don't. In fact, the fact that so many children die, but Calvin is still here, gives us hope every day, which is fantastic. But going by the mantra of knowledge is power, we have to try and find more and more of it, and build answers and solutions, not just for Calvin, but for the other children too, and the ones that are coming after him.
We are going to find some answers, and that all began with our first family day in Cardiff.
Coming to the family day here in Cardiff, it's connection with other people, it's hope, family, extended family, people who are going through the same thing, people who have children with Timothy syndrome who have gone through different journeys, but you can still relate to them. It's a relief to know you're not alone.
With the charity, I think, first of all, I was like, what would I really want? And I thought, well, I want answers. And I thought, how do you go about getting the answers? And that is research. That is doctors in the UK knowing that this condition isn't just Timothy syndrome. It's like a spectrum, because the kids can be so different, but yet so alike. And I think the research part goes such a long way to doctors having a better understanding. There's been a lot of emotions this weekend. They've been really high when you first meet somebody and you're like, I've got somebody else I can speak to. And then suddenly realising, I think I'm one of the lucky ones.
When you're told that your child is going to be, you know, you'll not outlive your child, it's like the worst fear ever, isn't it? I mean, every day counts for these kids. So this weekend has helped us so much, and it will do, because we're all coming together, and even though all of our children have the same condition, they are also different in so many ways.
So meeting the other children as well is nice, you know, to see them getting older and growing due to the awareness and the new information that we have now. That's nice to be a part of, yeah. If you can just cope 2 days with this, you're amazing already. It's a lot to accept as a parent that your child's got a life-limiting condition, so if you're getting up every day and fighting after knowing that, then you're just amazing anyway, aren't you, you know?
Having a group of people all pushing together to get answers and to drive potentially more research, etc. I think more heads together, without a doubt, definitely helps, I think. And I think we all bring different parts of that jigsaw puzzle probably together.
Well, I think the collaborative effort is absolutely wonderful. This is a very rare disease, so we're just going to be helped by the doctors who see these kids. We have a lot to do to educate the medical community that this is really out there, and for them to be specifically looking for it so that we can save these babies, first and foremost.
If you are a family affected by Timothy syndrome or medical professional caring for a child with this condition and would like to find out more, please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. We are stronger together. It's good to know you're not alone.
Jack, you're on mute.
Had to do it. Had to do it once. Yes, I'll stop it there so we're just coming to the end. We've been working with Timothy Syndrome Alliance now for 3 or 4 years, and I think it's an opportunity for us to get involved with that community, and kind of that film shows that some of the work that we've been able to do together, but this needs to be something that's done for every condition, and maybe kind of we're lucky with Timothy syndrome that it's a small rare condition, but yeah, it shows the opportunity that's there to link up with the community. So yeah, I'll open it up to questions, see if there's anything comes in the Q&A, but I hope that's been interesting and helpful.
Thanks so much, Jack. So as I said at the start, the Q&A is open, so please pop any questions you've got in there. So I'll just kick off with some here. So you've showed that really emotional video of the Timothy syndrome and mentioned that there was an annual meetup in Cardiff. How did that, carry on through the pandemic? Did it go virtually? How did that impact the quality of the sort of community and collaboration going on there?
So we went to a virtual meeting, and actually it's in some ways been really good, because we're talking about such a rare condition in this case that actually we've got now, we think about 200 people globally we've been able to find, but we're talking about people all around the world. And if you have Zoom meetings like this, they can be done at any time. So we moved time zones so that we were, or moved to meetings that were held in the afternoon into the evening to be able to catch the US, and that meant we could have lots of US speakers as well. And then we also kind of record everything because it's online. We can record and then we can share it with the families we've got in China and in the Middle East and stuff like that. So it's difficult because you do miss that face-to-face thing and that opportunity to just kind of chat to families and all the informal stuff.
Yeah.
But you can try and build that in. You can try and have informal kind of workshops and tea breaks and stuff, and all those things we were trying to do through the first kind of year of pandemic. And it has its opportunities because you can spread into a kind of an international project.
Fantastic. A similar sort of question to that. How did the pandemic change the landscape when it comes to collaborating with health boards?
So I think a lot of focus in health boards and in kind of the NHS and in government has kind of been taken by COVID. So actually the having the people on the ground to do collaboration with has been more difficult. Because people have been seconded or moved to other jobs to deal with kind of COVID problems. But that's starting to come back. And I think it's also shown what's possible. So a lot of work has come, and a lot of projects have kind of been a lot of collaborative work between universities and health boards has been expedited, and kind of red tape's been cut through to be able to get stuff to work, to get kind of things to happen. I know a few research projects that have been done kind of specifically on COVID that really would have taken years to get off the ground, but have taken months instead because everyone wants to get it going. And I think that's shown what's possible. So hopefully what we'll see is actually people are a bit more flexible for the kind of red tape stuff. And yeah, we'll start to see people kind of coming back to their previous roles with a bit more experience and knowledge. So.
Great. You mentioned they, don't work in silo and so, a problem shared, etc. How do you avoid duplicating research if you don't know sometimes what's going on, or you don't know what you don't know, and some people obviously don't want to give away their ideas or their sort of research. How is there a way around that, or is it case by case basis?
I think in an element it's case by case, and it depends on what you're working with. I think in mental health is particularly good at that because actually the culture of kind of big collaborations, international collaborations, has become the norm in mental health research. We've got these, so we do a lot of genetic work. We've got the psychiatric genetic consortia, which are kind of hundreds of researchers globally who combine, because to do the research that we do, you need hundreds of researchers collaborating. Practically, I've found that actually just emailing people. So if I see someone's doing something similar to what we're doing, then we can reach out. And actually that's been one of the really useful things of collaborating with the community, with the kind of charities in the third sector, because often other researchers don't want to tell me what they're working on, but they're very happy to tell the community. And actually, if we come and say, we're working with the community on this stuff, what are you doing? How can we work together? How the community want to know as well, then that can be a really good kind of route to sharing information. That's kind of where the family days and these kind of events that we hold for the community has been a really good source of that, because actually it's forced us to go outside of our silo and outside of who we know are working and find anyone who's publishing anything and say, look, do you want to come and share what you're doing? We're interested to see as well, but pitch this at the community, because they're the ones who really want to know.
So following on from that then, obviously with the Timothy syndrome, you can see the advantages and the benefits to the families of being involved in this, but are there incentives for other groups to get involved in this? Do we rely on their civic mission and their sort of community spirit to be involved in it?
I think it varies, but I think certainly when you're dealing with kind of people with lived experience, patient groups, they're ultimately motivated because it's their lives, so they're very, very motivated to do stuff. And I think there's just been that disconnect between researchers and the communities, and actually the lack of motivation has come from the researchers, the funders, the publishing giants to do this, but that's starting to come, because that has to come. It has, if you get your most interactions on Twitter, or you'll get your best views on YouTube if you're doing the work that people want to see. And actually we're getting kind of late to that, but yeah, we're realizing that, and the funders and people want that to be the case. So I think the motivation has been, I guess, to sum up, the motivation has been the slowest part from the big institutions, but that is changing, and I think we're going to see that changing more and more, and that landscape changing more and more, and it'll be expected more and more.
Another question here that you may have covered in bits is, what's the key to convincing someone to collaborate with you?
Yeah,
you can choose to sort of how good in depth the things you want with that one. We are recording this, so just
yeah, bottle of wine, don't know. No, I think it's often about what you're both bringing to the table. So if I'm working with the community are bringing the knowledge that they've the video showed, like the families are the best experts on the condition. So actually they're bringing knowledge that we're not aware of. Like we've come up with research questions which we would never have asked before had we not asked the families. So they're bringing a different type of knowledge to what we're bringing. And if you're talking about kind of collaborating with people in your kind of in the research world, then it's about actually why your collaboration together would be better. What are you each offering? So if you can go in and say, you're doing this thing, well, I have experience on this kind of thing that is linked to it but not quite the same. Can we do something together? Can we link you together? We're at the moment linking up with a team in Germany who are doing something slightly different to what we're doing, but it could be applicable. And actually we can say to them, well, we have some information that you would like, you're doing something that's kind of linked, can we produce something together? So it's that, I don't think you can go into a collaboration empty-handed, and it's about kind of going in that kind of open way and saying, this is what we have, do you want to bring something to the table as well? That kind of,
what are the barriers to collaborating, particularly with a university, for anybody outside?
Red tape. So it's a lot of, so I think there's kind of three really that I've come across. One is the red tape. So a lot of the way kind of the big institutions like universities and funders work is still quite old fashioned and also slow. So an example, kind of just to give a case example, the films we're producing, the film producers, the companies kind of expect to turn around things in 6 months, but the university timescales are not 6 months. It might take 6 months to get the funding, just the funding approved in the university. So actually it's about kind of that, those kind of practical barriers can be one thing. Attitudes is another. So you get a lot of kind of old-fashioned, maybe. People who don't want to share their information. They'll jealously guard what they've got. But actually, if you're going in open-handed, kind of, and saying this is what we have, then that kind of hopefully changes some of that attitude. And then I think the kind of, I think the other kind of barrier is really kind of linked to that attitude thing, is about kind of necessarily community attitude and community engagement. And you need to really kind of you need to be able to sell what you're doing. And but that comes down to the question you're asking. If the community don't want to, if the community attitude is that you're not asking the questions that we want answered, they're not going to be interested in what you've got to take to them. So that kind of brings it full circle.
That's great. I think we've answered plenty of questions here, and I know we've run over slightly, so apologies to everybody for that. Jack, are you happy for anybody to contact you following this if they've got any questions specifically about the research you're doing, but also about general collaborations or questions?
Yeah, by all means, find me on the university email system. Google me on the university email system, or kind of on the NMHRI web pages, or Twitter or whatever.
Alternatively, everybody's had the links for today from Jess, so if they want to contact her, and she can pass anything on directly to you as well.
Yeah, of course.
And I've noticed a few people have joined later on in the session, so just to remind you all that this session is recorded and we will be uploading it to YouTube along with all the other sessions today. But that's it. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was a really interactive session and a really lovely one to listen to. Thank you. Thank you to a fantastic speaker, Jack. And as I said earlier, please remember to fill in the evaluations form at the end of the virtual summer school, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.